I'm going to tell you what happened up on Hemlock Ridge. My name don't matter none. The people around here call me the one who knows. And what I know is this. There are rules in these mountains that are older than the land itself, older than memory. The damp earth holds a smell you can't forget once you've breathed it in. Not quite decay, not quite life. It's the smell of things breaking down and becoming part of something else. The hemlocks grow so thick along that ridge that light falls through in thin, dusty beams. At midnight, the dark has weight. It settles on your shoulders like something that's been waiting. The wind through those hemlocks don't whisper. It speaks, low and constant. A sound like someone's been breathing in the darkness for 100 years and just won't stop. If you listen long enough, you start to understand what it's saying. Case file 068 started with an inheritance, a deed. A cabin nobody in 3 generations had the sense to live in. But Marcus Webb had different ideas about solitude. He had different ideas about what a man could survive. The old ridge road runs north from town, climbing through laurel thickets so narrow your shoulders nearly brush both sides. It's the kind of road that makes you feel like the land is swallowing you whole, taking you into its mouth, whether you want to go or not. Marcus made the drive on a Saturday in October. The mountains were turning colors. Not the bright colors people drive up here to see, but the colors of things dying. Rust and blood and the pale yellow of old bone. He'd inherited the cabin from a grandmother he'd never met. His mother had left the mountain when she was 18 and never looked back. She'd warned him not to go, said some places remember things longer than people do, and they don't forgive easy. Marcus laughed it off. He was from the city. He thought old stories were quaint. The driveway was barely a driveway, more like a scar through the woods where something heavy had been dragged. His tires kicked up loose stone that sounded like the cabin itself grinding its teeth. The air got colder as he climbed, and the trees got thicker. Even through the windshield, he could feel the weight of the forest's attention turning toward him. The cabin appeared like a secret the forest had been keeping. Built maybe in the 1950s, though it looked older, weathered to a color that was almost the same as the bare earth around it. The porch sagged. The windows were dark and hollow-looking. There was a locked root cellar beneath the south side, its iron door green with age, sealed up tight with a chain so old it had nearly rusted through. The silence when he cut the engine was absolute. Not the absence of sound, but a presence of quiet so complete it felt like the whole mountain had stopped breathing to listen to him. The keys his lawyer had given him smelled like they'd been sealed in plastic for decades. They worked, though. The door swung inward into darkness that smelled of coal dust and something else. Something old. Something that had been waiting. He brought in his bags, just a weekend's worth. The interior was sparse. A wood stove, a cot someone had left behind, a table with a cracked surface, and dust. So much dust it seemed to be still settling, as if the cabin itself was slowly collapsing into itself. There were photographs on the mantel, black and white. A stern-faced woman, a child, an old man with eyes that seemed to look right through the camera lens and straight into whoever was looking at the photo. Marcus recognized his own mother's chin in the woman's face. He didn't linger. Under the floorboards, he found them. He wasn't looking for anything when he noticed the gap. The boards had warped with age and moisture, and one of them was proud of the others by maybe a quarter inch. He worked at it with a butter knife from the kitchen. The wood was soft and yielding. It came up easy. The space below was shallow, maybe 2 feet deep, and packed with burlap sacks tied at the neck with twine so old it was almost dust. Marcus pulled the first one out. It was light, almost weightless. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were the figurines. There were 7 of them in that first sack, each about the size of a man's hand, each carved or shaped, really, into something like a human form. Crude proportions, long arms, squat legs. No face to speak of, just a smooth oval where a head should be. But it was the material that made his stomach turn. Not wood. He knew wood. This was something else. Something pale and yellow-white, with a grain that was almost crystalline. The surface had a texture like old ivory, like something that had been bleached and hardened in darkness for a very long time. When he held one up to the light from the window, he could see fine cracks running through it, like it was very old, like it was about to break. The edges where it had been carved were sharp still, deliberately sharp, he realized. The carver had taken pains to make them that way. There were notches cut into the base of each figure, different patterns, different counts. Some had 5 notches, some had 9. One had a line scratched so many times the base was nearly severed. Marcus found something else in the burlap. A journal. The pages were brown at the edges. The handwriting was cramped and desperate, like whoever had been writing was trying to fit too many words into too small a space. He opened it at random. A date from 1987. A name. Eleanor Webb. His grandmother. The Whittler came again last night. I heard the knife on the stone, sharpening, sharpening. I don't know why it bothers with the ritual. It knows the rules. We all know the rules. I made another figure today, carved it careful. The trade demands it. Every bone it takes from the ridge I must give back, shaped in flesh. I'm running out of bone. I can feel myself breaking, piece by piece. And on the next page, I've hidden them. If he finds them, if he breaks them, what comes will be worse than death. The Whittler will remember every piece. Marcus set the journal down. His hands were shaking. There were 6 more sacks beneath the first one. 23 figurines in total. 23 carefully carved things that looked like they might have been made from bone. He didn't know much about his family history. His mother had been deliberately vague, like there were things she'd made a decision not to pass down. But he knew his grandmother had lived here, alone, for 37 years. Until she died in the winter of 1989, frozen in her cot despite a wood stove that should have kept her warm. He held one of the figures up to his face. It was warm from his hand, and he could smell something on it, something mineral and dark, the smell of earth after rain. That night he heard something, a sound like fingernails on glass, just once, just soft enough that he couldn't be sure he'd heard it. The next morning he called his mother. "You're at the cabin," she said. It wasn't a question. What was wrong with Grandmother Eleanor? There was a long silence. Then she told him about her father, Marcus's grandfather, who had lived on Hemlock Ridge for 40 years before the mountain took him. It started with the hunting, she said quietly. The woods provided, and he provided for the mountain in return. That was the old agreement. That's what the ridge demanded. But hunting meant bone. All of it had to be given back. There was a woman back in the 30s, living 3 hollers over. She said she'd made a trade with something in the deep woods. She was starving, and the woods gave her meat. More meat than she could have possibly hunted herself. But the trade required payment. Every bone she had to carve into small figures and bury at the tree line. She did it for 20 years before she died. Her son found thousands of them buried in her cellar. Her son burned them all, and the next winter he froze to death. So did her daughter. So did 3 people in the nearest town that hadn't done anything wrong except to live too close to that hollow. The rule got passed around after that. If the ridge gives you meat, you carve the bone. You don't burn it, you don't sell it. You shape it and you hide it. And you hope it's enough to satisfy what's living in the deep. Marcus's grandfather had done the same thing as Eleanor, carved the bones into figures, hidden them, followed the rules perfectly. But he made a mistake, his mother said. He broke one. That night something came to the cabin. It didn't break down the door or scream or rage. My father said he just heard a sound like someone sharpening a knife for hours, and scratching like fingernails on glass. By morning he was different, not hurt, not sick, just used up, like something had been whittling at him from the inside. He lasted 6 months. Eleanor kept the figures after he died. She followed the rules perfectly, never broke a single one, and it kept her alive, barely. But she was terrified of dying before she finished the trade. If you start the bargain and can't finish it, something comes to collect the debt. She died in her sleep, frozen, like the cold came from inside her and worked its way out. When she finished, his mother's voice was very quiet. "They're still there, aren't they? The figurines?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Then don't break them. Don't touch them. Leave. Don't stay another night." But Marcus had already made a decision, the kind of decision people make when they don't fully believe in danger until it's too late. The figurines were watching him. He'd stacked them on the table, all 23 of them. Even without eyes, he could feel them watching. He was reading Eleanor's journal by lamplight. The entries got more frantic as the years went on. She wrote about the sound of the knife, the scratching on the glass. 3 figures left, the last entry read. 3 figures and the debt should be paid. After that, nothing will come. The ridge will forget me. Unless someone breaks them. The journal ended there. Marcus had brought a hammer. He chose one of the figures, one with only 5 notches, the smallest of them all. He set it on the table, raised the hammer, and brought it down. The crack was very soft, barely a sound, but the figure shattered into translucent pieces, and from somewhere in the walls, or maybe from the forest itself, came a single sound like someone had begun sharpening a knife on stone. Marcus stood very stopped. The sound stopped. Then it started again, not in one place, but moving, along the walls, down the chimney, across the ceiling in a slow circular pattern. The knife on stone. The knife on stone. He turned off the lamp. In the darkness, he heard the scratching start. Fingernails on the window glass, methodical and patient, not trying to break through, not demanding entry, just announcing, the way you announce yourself before you come home. The scratching moved around the cabin, every window, every seam, and with each scratch, Marcus understood. This wasn't anger, this wasn't hunger, this was disappointment. This was a bargain being broken. The knife-sharpening sound grew quieter, moving back into the forest, but the scratching continued for hours, until dawn, until the first light turned the windows gray. When it stopped, the silence was even heavier than before. Marcus sat in the dark for 3 more hours before he moved. He gathered the figurines back into the burlap and sealed them. Then he packed his car. He didn't lock the cabin door. He didn't take the journal. He drove down the mountain in silence. That was 15 years ago. Last month, a real estate agent reached out to Marcus. The cabin had been flagged for property tax assessment. When the agent arrived, he found the door still unlocked. The figurines were still there, 22 of them lined up in a single row facing the window that looked out onto the deep forest. But something had changed. At the far end of the line, where a 23rd figure should have been, there was only a carving knife, ancient, worn. The blade so thin and sharp it seemed to vanish when you looked at it from certain angles. The real estate agent didn't make a report. He called the county clerk and said the property was unsaleable. He hasn't been back to that ridge since. In the mountains of eastern Kentucky, there are debts that don't expire. There are rules written in the language that the land speaks. And there are things in the deep forest that are patient. They will wait. They will whittle. They will remember every bone. And somewhere on Hemlock Ridge, in a cabin where the light falls thin and the wind speaks its ancient language, a knife is still being sharpened, over and over, waiting for someone foolish enough to finish what was started. Don't break the figurines. Don't break the rules. Don't let the ridge forget what you owe it. If you want to survive the mountain, if you want to know the old agreements before it's too late, you need to hear every case file. Subscribe now, because knowledge is the only payment the darkness will accept. And if you recognize these rules, if your family has made similar trades, reach out in the comments. We're listening. We're documenting. We're remembering what others have tried to forget. Follow redacted archives. The mountain is watching either way.